Okay, so this video is going to be a bit different from what I was hoping. Technical issues near the end meant that my footage of the last quarter of the game is more or less unusable, as you can see. And this is not a game that I'm interested in replaying again just to grab better footage. I've already invested enough time into this project, hence why it's coming out much later than I wanted. I also want to stress the fact that my thoughts on Lords of the Fallen are not a condemnation of Deck 13. Lords of the Fallen was basically the first bigger budget attempt at making a Souls-like from a studio that wasn't From Software, and while I would argue it's a pretty rough play and kind of a mess, Deck 13 has subsequently shown that they understand and care about the genre. The Surge is a pretty fantastic game that I thoroughly enjoyed, and what I've played of the sequel suggests that Lords of the Fallen was the anomaly here. It's hard to even know where to start with this game though. I was really excited to try it out back when it first released. That was a few years before I'd get an 8th generation console though. The first time I played it was just a couple months before I picked up my PS4 Pro at that revision's launch on my brother's PS4. At the time, I enjoyed it despite the heft of all of your movements. That was actually kind of refreshing in a way because it was headed in the opposite direction of Bloodborne, which I'd already played quite a bit of with my best friend. So while it took me a few years to pick up my own copy of Lords of the Fallen, once it was on a sale I could comfortably afford in 2019, I jumped at the chance to play it. I did not enjoy my first playthrough. I did not enjoy my second playthrough either this time around. I did not enjoy all of my interim attempts at poking at the game to see if my thoughts had changed. I do not like Lords of the Fallen. Every time I start to wonder if I've changed in some way that will help me see this game's light, it kicks the lamp off the table, gives me the middle finger, and tells me to choke on it. Lords of the Fallen could be a good game, but it's not. And it's not mostly because of all the subtleties of its design, rather than the bigger picture. Lords of the Fallen looks pretty good even today. Lords of the Fallen sounds perfectly fine, despite a few issues with dialogue across the entire experience dying until you restart the application. Loading times aren't short, but they're not mind-numbingly long. They're not even as bad as Bloodborne at launch or in its current state. Performance isn't great, but it's no worse than From Software seems hell-bent on giving us. I don't mind that the game is only like 15 hours long, or 17 with the DLC. I don't mind that it's effectively only 2 areas, the castle and the other realm. I like the bit near the end where you get to see all of the bosses you fought and how long you've struggled against them, in spite of how long that section just leaves you standing around doing nothing. I like some of the game's unique mechanics that, again, give the impression they cared a lot about what they were making. It's a cool idea for your bloodstain experience to start depleting the longer you take to get to it, and it's an even cooler idea to pair that to a health regen when you're nearby, so you can tactically choose whether to regain more of the lost experience, or have it help you stay alive against whatever might have killed you. To go along with that, the experience boost that comes with not resting is a great idea. And these are all ideas that the Surge would run so ridiculously hard with that just thinking about that game's balance and design gets me giddy. Here though, they feel unfinished, like prototypes. Beyond this stuff though, this game is so infuriatingly, frustratingly, irredeemably rough. No matter how I tackle it, the game simultaneously feels too easy and too difficult. As Iron Pineapple discussed when he looked at the game a while ago, choices like allowing the player to cancel basically any action with another, or the way some of the spells work, can give the player so much leverage over enemies that it can trivialize certain encounters. But if you're trying to play normally, more often than not it leads to stuff like trying to drink a potion to heal, just getting to the point where you're about to heal, and accidentally canceling it without realizing it because you try to buffer raising your shield as soon as the drink animation finishes. You'll see the healing animation, you'll hear the sound, you'll focus back on the fight expecting to go back in, and then die in one hit because you didn't realize you canceled the heal. This is intentional as a mechanic, by the way. There's a tooltip for it, but that doesn't make it work well. Something else that makes a game feel easy at times is that many bosses and most enemies have so few attacks, and most of them just amount to flailing around or swinging a weapon a single time, that on paper they become laughably easy to overcome. But at the same time, enemy attacks can have such errant hitboxes, unclear alpha effects, ungodly tracking, and do so much stamina damage that beating them feels like an insurmountable task. They too can cancel many animations, and because of the low amount of attacks at their disposal, you can often find yourself with basically only a single safe opening for an enemy type. The first boss really is emblematic of the rest of the game. Poor hitboxes, alpha effect communication on his fire sword slam, he puts his shield back up too quickly for even medium weapons, his animations feel mushy, and there isn't much of a clear transition between him having his shield down and his shield being up, and yet once he reaches his third phase, he gets easier because he drops his shield. This isn't like some of the fights in Sekiro, where he trades defense for aggression that adds threat. He literally just loses the ability to block attacks, which constituted so much of what made his tactics viable that he loses all sense of threat. It doesn't matter how the rest of his moveset changed, because that was the only difficult part. The second boss isn't any better. Even with the fastest character weight class, roll recoveries disallowed me from punishing half of his attacks, and for whatever reason he really didn't seem interested in my decoy half the time. It was a suggestion at best. The boss known as Champion, as well as a few other enemies, can have really messy grab hitboxes, far messier than most of From Software's worst grabs. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes you're just screwed. Mechanics the player has access to can be just as frustratingly unclear. Sometimes your lost experience starts depleting almost right away after you die. Other times it doesn't. It seems like it's kind of based on dying multiple times before banking the experience, but other times that doesn't seem to make sense, and I wonder if it's more about distance to where you died. Or there's the issue with the amount of potions refilled on stopping by checkpoint crystals. Unlike Dark Souls, you don't get a full refill every time. It's clearly based on how long it's been since you stopped at that crystal, which makes sense because resting at one doesn't respawn enemies. But sometimes it also seems to fully refill your stock, and others it only gives you a handful no matter how long it's been. The weapon speed stats and such also seem to make no sense, because they don't often match the actual swing speed of the weapon. Sometimes smaller weapons are faster than larger ones, and sometimes not. Sometimes one with a higher percentage in the menu is faster, and sometimes one with a lower percentage is. Maybe the percentage is only comparing weapons of the same type, like a dagger versus a dagger? Larger, slower weapons also seem to have a harder time entering backstabs, and if you miss the window, the stamina cost, whether you cancel the attack or not, is massive. For some reason, they're much easier with quicker weapons, as is stunning many enemy types. Hey, before we continue, maybe think about liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already. And if you really want to support the channel, take a couple minutes to share this video somewhere. Sharing is the most important part of getting a channel to grow and allowing myself and other creators to invest more into our projects. And the more you share, the easier it is to finally cross that threshold towards sustainability. See it, share it, repeat it. Trust me, it helps a lot. As should be clear by now, the biggest problem with Lords of the Fallen comes down to the lack of consistency and forethought, which makes it feel like you're never in control of any situation. Because of the inconsistency of enemy actions, often high stamina depletion on block, and because you're so slow unless you make yourself ultra squishy, cheap tactics almost always feel like the only solid solution, or at least the only bearable one. Not all of it is just plain awful either. I don't mind taking fire chip damage from fire crossbow bolts while blocking, but why does it immediately catch me on fire, forcing me to take a ton more damage than is realistically fair? I blocked it. I don't mind that loading zone doors reset enemies. However, if that's going to be the case, it really needs to be more clear about which doors are loading zones before you accidentally click on them. Not only can that reset an area you were struggling to clear and force you through 2 loading screens to get back, but it doesn't reset your healing potions or your lost health, so you're left at a huge disadvantage. And all just because you clicked on a door. The amount of large enemies with shields this game uses is also extremely tiring. terrifying, considering how hard it can be to break their poise to get a safe hit in, and how quickly they recover from it. With some weapons, it basically becomes impossible to be proactive against these types of enemies, and that's to say nothing about when the game shoves them into a narrow hallway with no way around. This spider fight early on is a good showcase of frustrations. It's super easy to get stuck on the surrounding benches when they don't break as soon as you make contact with your roll. The enemy has attack spam issues that can take most of your health in the blink of an eye. The camera is awkward in this room, and the lock-on switching is inconsistent. The decoy aggro is also inconsistent here, and yet once the spider does stay aggroed to the decoy, it melts in 10 seconds to 2 charged R2 attacks. The Annihilator near the end is also a good representation of how chaotic the balance and difficulty is here, how painfully out of control you can feel, and how even if you're completely cheesing something, the game finds a way to be unclear and unfair in a way that risks your defeat. Also, while it's not really worth picking up the game without the DLC included at this point, I didn't enjoy the DLC at all. I don't mind that it's short. I mind that it's basically a handful of curved hallways you rotate that have a couple of generic skeletons and ghosts in them, and then a boss whose main gimmick is just kinda guesswork until you know exactly how he functions. I've never been a fan of maze levels to begin with, so this wasn't to my taste. I know there was some more content in the DLC, namely refighting the boss, secret rooms and armor, etc., but similar to the secrets left in the base game, it just wasn't worth it. The game is too much of an uphill battle to merely play, so an hour and a half of cramped hallways and skeletons while beating the boss was more than enough for me. Honestly, as you can tell, I'm really frustrated with this game. I lack enough drive to make this video more well-paced because I just don't want to talk about Lords of the Fallen anymore. I couldn't even bring myself to make this video longer than an editorial. I invested so much time in this project hoping that I could find something to look more deeply at. But I couldn't. This game is just a list of bullshit everywhere you look. I was so upset when I realized so much of my footage was unusable, which isn't the game's fault of course, but I think it's telling that I've had worse setbacks when making videos before and still dealt with them in stride much more effectively, even if I didn't love the game. But I just did not want to play this game again. It took a while for my friends to finally talk me out of my depressive state and into one where I was okay with not going through the game again just to capture usable footage for the last few challenges and the painful final boss. The worst part is that this game could have been better with some consistency and a few other changes. I think cutting down on the amount of shielded enemies or giving them longer poise breaks that are easier to achieve would help a ton. Same thing with allowing the player to break the poise of non-shielded enemies easier. The slow weapons and the overall slower pace of the game wouldn't feel bad if you could ensure that with a giant weapon that sucks down stamina and takes 3 years to swing, a hit will really have an impact that enemies have a hard time withstanding or interrupting. Fix the awful alpha effects, the weapon speed stats being unclear, fix the animation cancelling. So much of this, while not necessarily small in terms of workload, is the nitty-gritty of design and balance. I'm not asking for tons of new spells or animations or enemy types or areas. The Surge is a similarly small, contained experience, and yet it is so refreshingly polished in comparison to Lords of the Fallen. I want to be accommodating to development efforts when time, budget, workforce, and other things prevent them from making a massive, detailed AAA juggernaut game. I even like the idea of a shorter Souls-like, and I want people to experiment with the genre. But man, this game is not it. I hope the reboot, The Lords of the Fallen, is better. So far it looks it, but beyond that, skip this one and never look back. This game is anger incarnate for me. I know I'm foolish enough that I'll play through it again eventually. I'll come back to it in 5 years thinking, I've changed a lot, and so have games. Maybe this time will be different. So to my future self, I want to take the time to just say one thing. Don't do it, bro. Skip it. Replay the Surge instead. This game has nothing for you, and it never will. But what do you guys think? How many of you have suffered through Lords of the Fallen? Did you enjoy it? What about the Surge or Surge 2? Are you interested in the reboot of Lords? Sound off in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.